Hello everybody, my name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and loin streamer, and today we're doing a book review for 2/3 comics, because the first two are going to be more heavily gone through, and then the third one is kind of a mention at the end because there's not as much for me to say about it as the others. And it's just going to be me today, but that's how it goes sometimes. But before we get started, number one, if you enjoy what I do here on the channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below. The number one way to be featured is through the monthly prompt writing contest, where I give you a prompt, you write a short story using that prompt, and on the first Monday video of the month, we bask in your creativity, hopefully getting them brain juices going to try new things, be weird, just have fun. That's the goal of Lemoy, is to just have fun and to get writing and kind of, in a way, we kind of talk to each other. Sometimes it's funny because multiple people will do different things, but also have a similar theme going through the story, or a lot of the prompts are actually inspired by conversations that happen on the Discord, and so then they're directly inspired by you guys and just participating, and then we have a good time, like the upcoming Lemoy. And then the third thing is, if you would like to check out any of my books, they're available at all of your favorite places to get books, including the local library upon request. With that said, let's get into this. So as you know, maybe you don't know, I just love to read. I don't always love what I read, but I do love to read. I do love to experience people's storytelling in the different forms that it comes. And in some cases, it's books. In some cases, it's video games. In some cases, it's movies, though I don't talk about them as much. And in some cases, it's comics. I actually do more with comics than I do with movies. So I do want to watch Blue-Eyed Samurai. I have no idea if I'll talk about it, but I have that on my to-be-watched. Like, I have a very long to-be-watched list because I just don't sit. When I sit down to read instead of turn on a movie. So, and I have so many books now that I need to get to because they're piling up because of Amygdala. But eventually, hopefully at the end of this week, I will be done with Amygdala so I can read something else. And then I can share Amygdala with y'all. But, so I got these two, technically three comics, and it kind of came to me in different ways. It's also funny because two of them have the exact same artist, and I did not realize that when I paired them together. I just wanted to put the two comics together to do a review together, and then as I was opening them, I was like, oh, they have the same artist. So the first comic I found was through the company or the publisher or the main account of that person rejecting Eric July's money back when Eric July was kind of shooting off at people around Christmas time, telling them how to behave. And he was like, hey, I just funded your garbage comic. Now here is some money, so behave yourself. Here's what I say to do. And the guy was like, no, I don't want your money, and stood up to Eric July. So I was like, you know what? Let's go check out your comic. And that would be Immortal Rising by Aaron C. and Alia Demina, with art by Jose Garcia. The second comic that I'll be talking about today is Crimson Wren of the True North by Cambria and Tom Pratt, with art by Jose Garcia. And that would be also known as Clownfish TV here on YouTube. And I found them because initially I was talked to about a different comic, which was previously seen on Clownfish TV. At the time, I thought that I was going to be getting Crimson Wren because that's what made sense to me. But when the comic book arrived, it was that comic book, and so then I went and purchased Crimson Wren on my own to also take a look at it because I was already now looking in this direction. So then here we ended up with both of these comics, well, technically with the three comics, and so here we are. Now the genre in the first two, Crimson Wren and Immortal Rising, appear to be typical fantasy adventure in ways, though Crimson Wren is a fantasy YA or children's literature. Kind of feels 10 to 13 specifically to me. So, not my favorite thing, fantasy adventure, but that doesn't mean that it won't be yours, but do take that into consideration for where my opinions lie. But on the topic of art by Jose Garcia, it's not my personal favorite style or an aesthetic that I'm particularly drawn to. It's cartoony and feels a little juvenile, which is absolutely perfect for Crimson Wren. That's not to say that the art is bad. It's just that it's not the right kind that I would have picked up either of these books if I had only known them by their art. It was literally just the situations in which I encountered these books that is what drew me to actually read them. However, I do think that the artist's style is very unique, full of color and expression, and very playful and very, very perfect, specifically for the Crimson Rhen. You can also very clearly see the similarities in things that go over, like especially there's a woman in both of them that has like dragging black under the eye. I think that happens to both. I think that's just what he does for female characters, because he does it, I think, to Angel and Alex and Tristan's mom in the Crimson Rhen. So that might just be how he does eyelashes for femininity on females. We'll see. We'll see as we go through. Anyway, so with that said, let's get started. We're going to be starting out with Immortal Rising by Aaron C. and Alia Damina. So the book starts out by establishing what's going on very, very quickly, not trying to hide the setting, even if it is using the as you know. The summer ball is tonight, where you will be officially recognized as Rangers. Your training is over. So we're meeting these characters who are graduating from a position of learning, and it sets up immediately what the setting is and what is probably going to be taking place in the near future. This is important because you look at some other comics that don't do this, that try to hide where it's going to go to have suspense. But this is like directly, this is where we are, this is who you are, this is probably who the main characters are, which are going to be the people graduating. It also continues to say, High Command charged me to select the 4 highest scoring graduates to provide the festival board this year. At the time of reading this, I said this may introduce us to the main characters or lineup of people for the slaughter. It depends on how it wanted to go, if bad things were going to happen, and like if this was acting as a prologue. The importance of this is also set up on the page, as it says this is a high honor and shows skill that'll be used to defend the kingdom. So immediately we've got stakes, we've got how they stand out from other people, which is going to make it either more important if they die on the field or just to set them up as powerful people. Now, this can be a double-edged sword, because in some cases, I've seen other books, I've heard people talk about other books, where characters are set up to be like these well-trained, like highest of class anything, and immediately they die and do stupid things. And you're like, you were the highest scoring graduates. You were the top of these special forces. And the first decision you make in this book gets everybody killed except for you? And it was a stupid decision? So this is a double-edged sword. As they prepare for the ceremony, one of the special 4 considers how he needs to ask out a comrade while he can. Then we go over to the king and his brother dressing for the night and talking about how sucking up to the new warriors is how you keep your throne. You got to get in the good graces and stay in the good graces of your warriors, or else, you know, it can be a problem. Out in the woods, the guy from the opening and his team girl are talking about the successes that they've had and the laughter they've had together, generally saying how they couldn't have made it without each other. The prince, this should be the warning sign that something bad is going to happen. I've read enough fiction at this point that if people are like, you know, things are great, I'm happy, everything is so great, this becomes freaking out of darkness syndrome, where they're like, I am so happy, and then everything goes to hell. So the prince and his brother arrive to meet the hunters out in the woods, since it's suggested that they go and do the sacred hunt with these people. I wonder, is this the first time that the prince has been on this? He said that this happens yearly. So then this must mean that the king is brand new to being the king, or else this would not be a new situation for him. That's also kind of an important thing to note, is the way that they've treated this boar hunting is as if it's normal. So these people should be briefed on what to expect when hunting the boar. If the king has gone on this before because he wants to suck up to the new graduates who are going to defend him on his throne, then he would have gone on this before. This wouldn't be his first time meeting these people. It wouldn't be his first time in the woods, right? Especially, you'd think, even if he wasn't king the previous year, would the king of the previous year not have prepared him for this by bringing him out here and showing him what he is to expect, what he needs to do in order to stay in the graces of the warriors? That's something to consider. Skip over to an astral plane, introducing Empress T. Lixmon as she calls for the troops to prepare for landing on Terra to find her ruby. Its powers have even been initiated, and it must be found. Also, she is freaking thick. She's pretty freaking thick. I feel like this is her whole point for being in the comic right now, quite honestly, because she doesn't really do much of anything. Also, it's probably how she recruits people. She wants you to join her. Look at her. Then we switch over to a moment on Terra where the people are unaware of what's coming to them. On this planet, a man is being elevated to a sacred role with sacred robes, and the Empress wants to start some things on Terra to get what she wants. Back to the boar hunt. Someone needs to use the bathroom. It is the brother with the mask, as you see right here, and he is ill prepared for this. Apparently, the mask is just to look cool, and he is not actually good at survival because he didn't bring any toiletries to help hide the smell of his business. So they all offer him, so somebody in the group offers him their toiletry bag, and everybody laughs at him for being ill prepared, so that the girl offers to go with him to use the potty so that she can keep watch, and then he just gets angry and is gonna not warn her that the dire boar is coming because he wants them to suffer for laughing at him for not bringing a toiletry bag. Back over to the Empress. She is starting something called the Dreadnought Protocol, and we get an explanation that things leave souls randomly scattered around the universe. The last piece of the heart of Locatus beats, calling out to the souls that he has created. We don't really have any explanation for what this is, and in my opinion, at this moment in time, there is more going on in this book than needs to be going on for a first issue, because we don't really have full investment in that main group yet, and as it gets into being a serious battle moment, we're just pulled away to get this explanation of something that is completely unrelated. Again, making the Empress here feel just like she's here for fan service or to show off, and I know that what she's doing is probably going to set up something that happens in a future issues of The Calling, but it's just disruptive for the way that this is now, and it makes the pacing feel really off. Because it's so disconnected from everything. It would make more sense to put that at the end of this comic and just have a full thing of the Empress doing her thing there than for what is actually at the end of this comic. At least from my perspective as the consumer of this and how my experience was with this, it would have made more sense to leave it just being these guys working with the Calling and then put the Empress thing at the end. Anyway, we go back to the hunting party after all of the action has happened. Have no idea where the boar is gone because its body isn't even laying anywhere, so they either chased it off or it's been forgotten about, but it's kind of messed up what the pacing of this looked like, especially when it cut away to do a different scene, so that the resolution of this scene wasn't even on the page. The resolution of the scene happened off the page. Anyway, Lori is bleeding out, dying, and the leader dude is panicking, obviously, because he's got a crush on her, he cares about her, but she's also a member of his squad. The masked dude thinks that apparently the masked dude thought that this was a freaking game, so that's why he didn't take this seriously, to be fair. The warriors were all laughing about this before too, so apparently they were not given the proper warning about the dire wolves or the danger of this area. They were being sent in to go and collect the yearly sacrificial bull. That's something that also didn't make sense to me. It's announced that they need to take Lori to a healer since she's in really bad shape, but they're kind of lost. And the masked guy is like, "Oh my gosh, I've never seen a person broken like this before." So apparently this dude really is just cosplaying as a ninja and actually doesn't have anything better to offer. Higher ground does not help them finding their way, as leader guy climbs into a tree to try to figure out which way they need to go in order to get to something better. Also, I just want to comment on like how nice this panel looks, with giving us shot of the forest with the red trees with the orange clouds. I think that this coloring is very nice. But getting back to the story, at this point, it did have me questioning how these were the top warriors in their class, and yet they are so unprepared for going into an area that is apparently used annually for collecting this boar for the sacrificial ceremony. And then they just wandered into a random direction and ended up getting lost. Now, I can understand it if it is some kind of magical forest, which maybe it is a magical forest. Maybe that'll come out in a future issue where they kind of walked into this thing and maybe they portaled somewhere and they don't understand where they are. But as it is now, it is just confusing. This doesn't instill much faith for the new warriors, in my opinion, if they are this easily, 1, defeated, 2, unable to prepare, and then 3, they got lost this easy doing what is an annual job that should have been easy peasy lemon squeezy. So the group is then attacked by some undead creatures, as you see here at the bottom of the page. Lori is already in really bad shape, and so some of these undead creatures are obviously like, that guy just freaking took a chunk out of her neck. She obviously wasn't dead, but she very well is now. I don't think that medic is gonna help much anymore. Eventually, as they're getting attacked by these guys, and Lori is obviously now actually probably dead, this guy in a cape appears. and starts speaking in another language. Someone casts a language spell so that they can understand each other, making it kind of unnecessary that they even spoke a different language, though I guess it just signifies that they're from different places. It turns out that this guy has never seen an elf before. He's also been sent to vanquish the undead villains of this area. It's kind of weird for him to think. Down here he says something about, oh, I didn't know that elves actually existed. I thought those were things of imagination, while also saying that he lives in a land of lizard men, undead, and werewolves. How do you accept the idea of lizard men, undead, and werewolves, but you're like, elves? I'm not sure elves are real. I don't really know what the prospects of that would be like. To just, obviously they are so close, and maybe the elves are very secretive people that kind of just mind their own business. But there is something wacky going on in here. I was also a bit confused at this point because these guys seem very confused as to where they are and how they even got here. And the guy is explaining that this is Terra, a world most ruled by the undead and werewolves. So this guy is talking like the elves had ended up on a planet that is not their own. But I think that this is just this character talking directly to the audience about where they are. But in the way that it is written here, it makes it seem like he's telling them that they are somewhere that they didn't intend to be. That they didn't just wander into a random forest, but that they wandered into a forest that teleported them somewhere else, or they got on a spaceship and then teleported somewhere else. But, like, if you scroll back all the way to the beginning of the comic, like, the way that it just moves, they kind of, here they are walking away from town into the forest, and then, like, the king arrives in his spaceship, and then they just keep going. So it doesn't seem like they should be on another planet. Anyway, the guy here in the robe tells them that it's too late to save their dead friend, and the only thing that you can do is take her now to be buried. The nearest town is 2 days away, and they could bury her there, but that's probably the best that they can do, and so that's where the story ends. Then, in the end of the book, you've got a couple pages of the Knights of Locutus preview, or what is going to be a continuation, and honestly, it just is a guy in angel armor showing off that he can fight a beast. That's not enough of anything. There's not enough of anything here to get me interested or invested in this story. Only if there wasn't enough here to get me interested or invested in the story, because it's just something completely different. But it might grab you if you're like, oh, I like those designs. I like that idea. For me, you need to sell me on the importance or the interest of the main comic. And that's why I say I think the Empress stuff could have been put at the end. Because now we've got like 3 different stories within 40 pages, and it doesn't really commit to any of them. So the pacing of the whole thing felt off. And then the Empress never actually had what she did become important to the main story of the main comic. So really, if that's going to be something that comes into the next story maybe, or the next volume maybe, then it would have made even more sense to have the Empress scenes be at the ending of this book in order to set up what was going to be the thing of the next book. That way you could have the main conflict and the main action of this story be the introducing the warriors, introducing them going on their hunt, introducing, you know, the king being a part of that, getting involved with the undead, meeting the robed guy, and then you've got her, and then the pacing would not have been as disrupted. The transition between the ceremony warning and the hunt is awkward, and it really doesn't imply how they got so far away. And again, maybe that's a question for another time, but also I feel like there is some level of telling the audience, directly talking to the audience through the characters to try to give exposition to them, when the characters should really just be talking to one another. There are a couple places in this book where it feels like the story is breaking the fourth wall in order to talk directly to the audience to exposit information, and I think that weakened the writing. The Empress and her ruby searching does not come into the story at all, again, making it completely useless at the points where it is at in this, especially because the Empress is used to break up action scenes. Like, we're in the middle of this fight scene, and then we go for a page to have her talk about exposition for whatever her plan is, and then come back, and the guy is gone. Like, I don't think that that is good plotting. You need to show the end of the fight so that we can see how it ends, so we can see how they dealt with things, instead of taking the easy way out, which is just skip to the end. And I keep finding this in so many stories, in so many... It's not even... So, Will Jordan did this at the end of Dark Harvest. The Yakuza games have done this. Even though I love the Yakuza games, the ending of Yakuza 1 and 2, Kiwami, were freaking bad. Because it set up an explosion and then just scene skipped all the way to the ending after everything had finished, instead of actually writing out the denouement or the fallout of the climax. and I just think that it is weak writing. And the final comment that I have for this is I don't know if it's much more of a fantasy trope, or if it is just a comic book trope, or if it is a fantasy comic book trope, or if it's just a bad writer trope, where it's trying to force too much information into an issue or into one book, where you're covering way too much stuff and it waters down what the actual plot line of your story is. It sometimes feels like trying to show off your impressive world building, trying to show off all of your cool stuff, and I'm running into this with Amygdala as well, where it's just showing off all of the stuff that you've made to the point that it waters down your story and distracts from what your actual story is. Again, maybe this is just a trope of certain types of comics, but Mary Sue didn't do this. Mary Sue stayed focused on the characters and letting the characters do what they needed to do and following Mary around as she did what she needed to do. And we got to see that story have a good pacing. Maybe I've read other comics before bringing them to this channel, and none of them actually had this issue of constantly scene skipping between, different places within 30 to 60 pages. So it'll be interesting at the very least to compare this to Not Drunk Enough when I get on to talk about Not Drunk Enough as well. I'm very much looking forward to Not Drunk Enough. So anyway, that was Immortal Rising. The next book that we're going to talk about, the next comic that we're going to talk about today, is Crimson Wren of the True North. Immediately, you're going to see a similar style. Also, I would like to comment on Jose Garcia's landscaping or scene shooting. Like his art style has an ease to it, has a playful youthfulness to it, and he does a great job with scenescapes, kind of like this one right here. Beautiful artwork that has a lot of body and a lot of scope. It's something that it doesn't get enough credit for sometimes, I think, when you're talking about comics, because obviously characters are super important, and stories for me are super important since I'm on the writer side of things, but being able to see the world and being able to see the scope with with these ships in the air like this as well, there is so much value in having these wordless pages that just show the world, and I think Jose Garcia does a great job with that. So this is Crimson Wren of the True North by Clownfish TV. We start out with an action sequence of a couple of kids running away from a small gang of other kids. This guy, he's made his hair green as kind of a prank, and also because, Rhen over here has magic and is able to do that. Green hair over here is like, I'm telling my dad, because this is, we're going to find out, one of the son of, the owner of the town. So this is not, Rhen is not messing with small fries. He's messing with the bully, who is the second bully of the city. Let's be real. His dad is the real bully. Tristan, who is the blonde guy here, is like, Rhen, you're not supposed to be using magic. You've been told not to use magic since your dad died. I wonder why that is. Like the other book, we're immediately thrown into an action scene and some background. It did a better job at throwing into an action scene in this one because it's not an ensemble where you had a whole bunch of people being introduced, and that one, it was like 4, 5, 6, whatever, in the group. But it also immediately from page 1 starts using their names, because you got Rhen that shows up here, and then on the next page he says Tristan. So you know the characters' names, as opposed to the other one where you only get Lori because she's dying. We also get an establishment of where they live, which is Setton's Port, which will also come in later when you hear, oh, okay, so they're in trouble with Mr. Setton, who owns the town. That's great. Rhen also quickly comes out with a proud answer where he goes, he had it coming, Tristan, which was in response to Tristan saying, why would you do that? You knew what would happen. You knew that we would get in trouble. Well, this shows that Rhen doesn't care about the risks. He is, in fact, a risk taker. After some shenanigans and some running and a little bit of use of magic, they break a window. They get away from this guy. He gets in trouble. And they use him being in trouble to get their chance to get away and get back home. Once back at home, they get lectured by Tristan's mom, who's also Rhen's adoptive mother, and they are late. Look at all that real estate. They really do live out in the country. They're reprimanded for not only being late, but also because Rhen used magic and he's not supposed to use magic. Tristan is defending Rhen's use of magic because he's like, they were making fun of Rhen, saying that his parents died in order to get away from him. And the mom is like, well, they shouldn't have said that, but you also shouldn't have used magic. This kind of is setting up this idea that the magic is bad, or that there are restrictions on the magic that can get you in trouble. But you do run into the case where it doesn't really tell you how or why he is avoiding using magic, other than that the parents are like, don't do it. It's also kind of weird when society openly hires mages. So, like, why wouldn't Rhen be able to openly use magic? Mr. Setton's not even against magic, as you find out later, we'll find out very soon, that he's hired a mage to come and change his son's hair back to the correct color. So Mr. Setton's not even against mages. So then why can't Rhen use his magic? We're never given an answer to that. Other than it might be a safeguard because something bad happened to Ren's dad that may be magic related, but otherwise, like, that's a guess. Parents tell the boys, then dad comes over and is like, hey, I know that you guys were the ones that broke the window, so you're gonna go and make things right tomorrow and pay for that freaking window. And then the boys are told to go inside and get ready for dinner because dinner's there. As the boys are inside, mom and dad are talking about how are they even gonna pay for that window? They don't have any money to pay for anything. And they can't possibly sell Ren's land that he inherited from his father or the ship that he inherited from his father because it's all that he has left of his family. Then you're also introduced to the little sister, Evangeline, right here. And they just eavesdrop on the parents who are panicking about money. They sit down for dinner when Mr. Setton, who but the big-nosed, monocle-wearing man himself, shows up to lecture Daddy about the money that he owes on the house and the job and how they're going to get kicked out of these places if he doesn't pay the money in time. And, like, within a week's... And how they're going to get kicked out of all these places and their property reclaimed if they do not pay in time. Why didn't they just build a house on Ren's dad's property? They could just live in his ship. How about that? But no. It turns out that the dad has also been having difficulty getting work because even though he does good work, people are racist. That's just what it is. These guys are from out of town. I don't know why they moved to this town. I don't know why they don't leave, especially when you got this tyrant over here being the way that he is. But they get into a fight and he's like, BT Dubs, not only are you going to pay for that window on that shop, not only do you have to pay for the properties that you have purchased from me, but also I called a mage in to change my son's hair back, an expensive mage, an expensive mage, an exclusive mage, and you're going to be freaking paying for it. So I will foot you the bill. That just adds to all of your stuff. So then he leaves and says, you've got 1 week, good sir, freaking fix it. And everybody is panicking about having to move. Rhen doesn't want to lose another home and thinks that he should just leave the family. Leaves him and his pet Winston, or his friend Winston, whatever that guy is, should just leave so that they don't burden this family anymore. Because he thinks the family is going to have an easier time if it weren't for him. But the parents are like, no, we love you. Don't even talk like that. We're going to figure out a way to do this. So later, Rhen goes to bed with Tristan, and they're hanging out, and Rhen is freaking out about, how can I help? I got them in this mess. I can fix this. I need to fix this. I need to find a way to make money. So you know what? I'm going to go and visit our friend Alex to get her opinion to see if she can help give me some kind of job. Because the friend Alex, her mom owns a tavern, and so he thinks that maybe she'll have some sort of insight into ways that he can make money. And when he gets there and mentions the problem, she talks about how there have been guys in the tavern talking about finding this thing called the Traverse, which is more or less like a flying house ship thing. Looks like a mansion, but it is actually a spaceship, and how it's kind of mystical, made by a legendary engineer, a spaceship engineer named Thaddeus Windle. And there's supposed to be so much treasure in that house that if you find it, you're pretty much set for life. And nobody knows if this house actually exists, but he wants to chase it down. So we're getting strong Treasure Planet vibes from this, as if, the strong vibes weren't there already. But in order to start making moves on this ship, Rhen wants to go and see if he can talk to the guys in the bar about maybe being a part of their thing. Maybe they need a mage for their trip. So he needs to get into the tavern, but there's a rule in the tavern that no kids are allowed. For some reason, this translates into cross-dressing Rhen. I think that's just kind of a children's trope, a children's movie or cartoon trope in some cases. So this somehow gets them in because Alex tells Jake that her friend is over and the friend needs to talk to Alex's mom about spending the night. And so then Jake is like, okay, fine, go in there and talk to your mom about this. It's not sussy that this person just walked over late at night. I don't understand why they couldn't do this with him as a boy either, unless you just be like, that's a male. He's not spending the night. So there's that. Anyway, so Alex is going to go talk. Alex is going to go and keep watch / talk to mom. And then Rhen sees the pirates who are talking about the treasure. He finds out that they have a treasure map that they stole from someone else. And Rhen is like, bro, if we can get our hands on that map, then we don't need them. He uses his friend Winston in order, and he uses his friend Winston and a distraction with Alex in order to steal the map. Of course, the distraction is accusing some poor random man in the bar of sexual harassment, so that Jake is throwing something, and so that Jake is throwing a fit and threatening that guy, and the pirates are like, what the heck is happening over there? And then Winston grabs the map with his tail, and they all run out of the tavern. However, they weren't fast enough to not be noticed by the pirates. The pirates see them running, and so Rhen uses magic to get away from the pirates. And Alex is like, so if you're gonna go on this hunt, then I am gonna come with you. I want to come with you. And Rhen is eventually like, okay, fine. Meet us back at the barn where we keep my spaceship soon. We're gonna take off as soon as you're pretty much there. I'm gonna go get back, get to Tristan, and then we're pretty much taking off. So he gets home, he tells Tristan what they're going to do, and then tells Tristan that he needs to come because, you know, Tristan is the smart one. He's gonna be the one that's decoding the map. So Tristan eventually agrees, because if they find this treasure, then they can pay for everything that they gotta do, and it's better to just, you know, disappear for 2 or 3 days to see if they can do this. Again, they have about a week to get all that money, so as long as they can maybe find that money, then the parents aren't going to be that mad if they ran off without permission. So they go to this back area where the ship is being kept, a ship that belonged to Rhen's dad, and as they are getting ready to climb onto it, Evangeline shows up and is getting mad at them and telling them they can't go anywhere, and so they're telling her that she needs to get out because she's not coming with them, and she says she's going to go and tell mom and dad that it's happening. That's when the pirates show up again, because of course they didn't just show up at the bar. A fight ensues, and this random man comes out of nowhere just in time to, like, smack people around. As they climb onto the ship, Rhen uses his powers to lift both Evangeline and this old man onto the ship, while Tristan starts the ship and flies them out of the place. They forgot to open the bay, and so he just crashes through the window on the top of the building. I guess they're going to have to pay for a little more than the one shop and the property. Hopefully they do find that treasure to pay for all of it. Again, we got just some wordless panels. This is how I feel when I'm reading a comic book that is made by somebody who understands the medium, because they don't feel the need to put words into every single panel, and they actually have panels that just exist for the mood, that just exist to move things along, to speak without words. And you saw it in George Alexopoulos' comic. I think Jose Garcia also understands it, because you just have scenic panels. Once they fly away, they're then asking, who the frick is this old man? They tie him up because he's kind of passed out, and they're like, well, what should we do with him? Winston is like, I mean, we should just throw him freaking overboard. There is that. Eventually, after briefly talking about the map and seeing all of these little red dots on it, trying to figure out what they mean, maybe those are the places where they should check for the house. They're not entirely sure how to read the map. Then the old man wakes up and explains that he is a scientist and an archaeologist who has been looking for this famous airship / mansion. And he was actually the one that initially had that map. And then those pirates stole that map from him. So he wants to help them find that location and use all of the know-how that he has. He's also surprised that the ship is just full of children, and is also super impressed by Rhen's abilities. Oh my gosh. We also have this bizarre, it likes to do this. So sometimes the pacing and the writing is really off, while the scenes and the drawing are perfectly fine. Like, the comic work is perfectly fine, but sometimes the script is really off. Like right here, where this guy is looking at Winston and is like, oh, Winston is, what the frick is that? And then he says, I'm a phoebe, and it's, oh, it can speak, a phoebe, how marvelous, as if he knows what a phoebe is. And then, yeah, Winston is unique. Professor York, why are you trying so hard to find the traverse? So, like, this is a hard switch over between what is happening in the scene, in that discussion, and it feels like this is totally, the focus on Winston was just a waste of time and very unnatural, because it interrupted the tension of the moment. And there are times throughout this story that do that, where it's like, I'm gonna do this other thing to make a joke that's gonna break the tension and break the focus of the characters just to do it, and then we'll do a hard turn back into what the characters are actually doing. Anyway, eventually they agree to work with this old man because he wants to find the ship and they just want the treasure. So they're like, look, if we find it, then we can have the treasure, you can have the ship, everybody is happy. And the dude was like, deal. So then they land in this random town where it was one of the dots on the map and start looking around for maybe signs of the house, what they should be looking for. And they run into this random woman who is kind of the most generic cartoon woman possible, who hates kids but doesn't want to say that she hates kids because she's like, are you guys here to sell me stuff? Because I hate children that try to sell me stuff. Oh, you're not going to try to sell me? You're not telemarketers? You're not Girl Scouts? Well, good. Okay, so what can I do for you? And the lady talks about, they ask if she's seen anything weird, unusual lately. And the woman was like, oh my gosh, there was this mansion that just appeared one day in the neighborhood. And we were all very, very curious about it, but we never saw anybody come in or out of it. So then everybody went there, not a mob. Of course it wasn't a mob. We would never send a mob to go look at this house. But anyway, we, not as a mob, we went to go and look at this house, you know, to greet our neighbors with apple pies that weren't fired torches. And suddenly the house was just gone, and we don't know what happened to it, and we haven't seen it since. So there's that. And so these guys are like, okay, that makes sense. It was probably the pirate ship. So now they've got maybe some sort of hint. So they're looking at the map, thinking of where they can go next, and they feel like they've got something. They're heading back to the ship when they run into pirates that are checking out their ship and challenge them. Those pirates are going to freaking try to steal the ship, so it turns into a fight scene where Rhen kind of destroys them all and turns red. He just gets an explosive power of redness and then beats them all, and then they fly away. And somebody yells at him. Oh yeah, then Evangeline says, you just got your butts kicked by Crimson Rhen, which is then what gives him his title. As they fly away, all of the pirates then start gossiping in the pirate scene like comic skaters talk about each other on YouTube. The legend of Crimson Rhen spreads, where now everybody is fearful of him. There are so many different things going on about him, with how he killed a bunch of people, with how he destroyed a bunch of people all on his own, with how he basically controls people's minds, so you don't want to get involved with him. Back over to Rhen, he has completely washed out all of the red except for his red jacket, which he is going to keep. Our professor here says, you know what, it's probably best to keep the name of Crimson Rhen because it'll make people fearful of you, and you know, when you don't want to be messed with by weirdos, you want to have a reputation, and I'm betting that your reputation has already started growing. So as they're talking about this, Rhen is obviously super happy that he's now got a reputation, probably. And Tristan is looking at the map, seeing that there is a brand new dot on the map that wasn't there before, and he doesn't know how it got there. The professor surmises that it's possible, the professor and Tristan surmise that it's possible that the map is connected to the house, and so the red dot might actually be something that magically appeared because it's connected to the house, and so it's marking where they should go next. So that's where everybody is going to be headed. But before they continue there, they stop at this sky city thing in order to refuel. They're only there long enough to be spotted by pirates so that more gossiping ensues, so that those pirates can prepare to stalk the main characters here with their little dinghy fisher boat, which honestly, cute. It's cute. And they set off towards the next location. I can't help but notice the professor is not there. It is just the kids, but obviously this is a kid's story. So very Treasure Planet inspired / feeling. I have a feeling that this was inspired by that. Monty said the same thing. Also feels very One Piece inspired when it comes to the pirates, but I mean, how can you not think of One Piece-ish? Well, and you've got Jack Sparrow here. Let's be honest. Let's not skip over the fact that we see Captain Jack in this scene. But some of these guys, I mean, they really be putting on that One Piece-esque. In some cases, One Piece is kind of crazy with the appearances at times. Anyway, this is very clearly, or was very clearly to me, for a young adult audience, especially of the 10 to 13 area in particular. Rhen is super powerful mage above his years, which is recognized in the story, and not doing anything with it, which is pretty typical kid lit. There is no setup for like why he has these powers and isn't doing anything with them, why he's not like making petty money with this stuff, especially since obviously his family is in need of money and he could be giving it. The quips speak for children's literature as well, like when Tristan says you turned his hair green, and then Rhen is like chartreuse, and that comes out multiple times to break the story of correcting them. The biggest criticism that I have for the story, like the pacing in the story was perfectly fine. You saw why it was going from one thing to the other. And so following after Immortal Rising, to get into this where you actually see the story moving as it kind of should, and it progresses in a way that makes sense. It was nice. The one criticism that I actually have for this story is the casual mean-spiritedness that a lot of books have, and I really don't like it. I get that and it's just these little quips that are like making characters all sound the same. That it's like when he's talking about going to see Alex, and then he makes some snide remark to Alex because she says something, or then she makes some snide remark to Rhen because he says something, and it's trading in character and relationships in order to try to make jokes or to try to be quippy, and that ends up losing the identity of your characters as well as the identity of their relationships, where they all then start sounding and looking and feeling the exact same. And I remember going through this when I was in grad, and I remember going through this same thing or a similar thing in graduate school when one of my mentors pointed out that I was trading in my characters' personalities in order to make jokes in Dead End Drive, and I had to determine which was more important. Was it important to be snarky and try to make jokes at everybody's expense and at the characters' expense of them having their own voice? Or was it better to remove some of those jokes and to not try to sound so clever or so snide and just let the characters speak for themselves? And I understand that now, especially. But when I look at literature that just lets characters and wants characters to be mean to one another, I feel like it's just a part of the permeated internet and culture where people are just mean to one another. Like, I don't know why. Sometimes it's for personal gain, sometimes it's to make themselves feel better, sometimes it's for the blood sport of it, but I don't think that it's helpful for storytelling. Some of the moments I have written down for this meanness are when Alex is answering the door to Rhen and is rude with, "Not that I care if you're gone, idiot." And then Alex not knowing about the Wendell thing, which is obviously going to be an interest, like a special interest. So then Winston is really rude to her and is like, freaking read a book. I think you can have one, maybe two caustic characters in your cast who are just mean to everybody, but if they all are constantly making snide remarks to one another, it just gets exhausting and it's negative and it drains you. The other criticism that I have for this is that it feels like it suffers from a feeling that nothing exists outside of this moment. The plot starts and nothing is interrupted. These kids' days are not interrupted by this plot. Why doesn't Rhen use his powers to make money? What does Rhen usually do with his day? Do Rhen and Tristan and Angel have school normally? Like, how is nobody going to notice that they're basically missing for however long that they're gone? And their days are not obstructed. They're not having to work around something. And so then that makes it feel like the story just began and it ends with what is happening here, as opposed to the world continues before and after, and there are things built around this moment, outside of this moment, and that makes it feel more hollow than it actually should be or needs to be. And it doesn't have to be this huge big thing, but implications of like, oh, these other people are going to notice things, or why isn't Rhen making money in some way when obviously mages get work? Those are all questions that I personally have, because I see things as existing outside of the current storyline. And so then those things are going to come into play in the storyline. Then finally, the last book that I'm going to talk about today very briefly was previous on Clownfish TV, and it would be classified as comic/humor. I don't have pictures of that because I didn't scan it. But the summary that I would give it is described as being based loosely on the videos published by the YouTube channel Clownfish TV. This is a book of comic strips created by a fan paying homage by either making some of those videos into comic strips or by writing fan scenes inspired by the videos, so like bloopers or behind the scenes style things. And I couldn't tell which was what, since I'm not familiar with the channel, so I don't know what was him. So I don't know what was the artist redoing things as comics versus expanding on things that were said on the channel. Most of it looks like culture/TV references like Cuties, different Marvel, DC, Disney properties, the She-Ra controversy, different things like that being posted in, from online. The art style very much matches the art style of Clownfish TV's YouTube channel. This book felt to me like it was by and for fans of the YouTube channel. It felt like merch of a YouTuber's channel. So like if you are a fan of the channel and then you want extra content, or you want to support them in another way, or you want to support content around them, that's what this feels like. But me being an outsider, not aware of, not familiar with Clownfish TV, really didn't get anything out of it. I did think that transporting YouTubers or people into a book is really, really hard because part of what makes them likable or what comes through is the charisma and the personalities that come through the screen. But then trying to put that on a page, especially with how chaotic some of the YouTubers are, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to capture on the page. And I think that the artist did a really good job trying, but without me knowing any of the stuff, it looks like chaos. The artist also did put like musical notes around the outside, or musical numbers, letters outside of the paneling to give it music in case you wanted to make it more of an interactive situation. It also feels very, very much like a labor of love or a love letter to Clownfish TV and the fans of the channel. But with how chaotic it is, be it the changing scenes, the going through kind of a backlog of different bloopers, of different extended scenes, of different of whether it was a YouTube video or a behind the scenes thing, like when they moved house or when one of the children was born. It's hard to find a storyline because there is no storyline and they're all kind of mishmashed together. Sometimes there are labels for when panels change from when it goes from one comic strip to the next. Sometimes there's not. And then you've got the musical notes, items to play around. And then you've got the music between the panels that also kind of adds to that chaos where it's hard to tell where something starts and where something ends. The art is very expressive, playful, and colorful. The book in general is more political than anything that I actually like to read generally, and I assume that's because the channel is fairly political when it comes to talking cultural stuff. You know, we're talking about isms, we're talking about some of them in there complaining about the appearances of other people. Like, again, we're talking about women judging women, of saying, well, why isn't she pretty enough for me? Why isn't it a character that looks like me? And just, I don't care. I think that it's kind of entitlement to look at somebody else's creation and say, why don't I see me in it? And so then that's not a conversation that I really like having. And I think it's one of the weaker conversations that you can have when you're talking about criticizing media or criticizing, analyzing media, is to go, well, but that doesn't look like me. Or why isn't that woman's boobs bigger? Like, I don't like the way that woman looks. That's fine. You don't have to like the way that she looks, but you're not oppressed because you don't like the way that a character looks. And that's some of what came into this. There is especially a long rant in here about the She-Ra controversy where you get, why can't the character look like me? And assumptions that since the bad guy is feminine, then it's demonizing femininity. I just get sick of this kind of media analysis, that it is so flimsy, it is so political that you're not actually looking at the stories or looking at the directions that people are trying to take art. Look, some things are done politically, some things aren't, but you're really not reaching any new people by making assumptions about everything. And then you even create new characters, because this same conversation has come in with Aloy from Horizon and from brand new properties, that it's not even just contained to remakes that people don't like. It's just tiring. Other things in here include family stories. It seems like a fictionalized biography at times, the birth of a daughter, and the love of toys/culture from the 80s. A good portion of the last part of this book was specifically about He-Man, Master of the Universe, and Kevin Smith, the drama and hatred going between them, and I'm sure the fan base is invested in this, but again, as an outsider, I struggled to care at the mention of making a bunch of videos about He-Man when you could literally be making videos about anything else. And then just, it's one thing to make videos about it. It's another thing to then have it put into a comic that this is what you're doing on your YouTube channel. And just like, so again, I think this book is by a fan, for fans, as an extension of the channel, but it doesn't really have a storyline, and it doesn't really tell you who these people are other than YouTubers that complain about typical YouTuber media things. If anything, I would say as an outsider, this book preemptively made me like, I never really want to look into Clownfish TV because I don't like the personalities that come through this. So anyway, those are 3 comics that I've read more recently. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Have you read these comics? Will you read any of these comics? Are you interested in any of these comics? With that said, thank you so much for watching. Have a great weekend and don't die.
The only people who should come are those who want to meet their monsters.
If this is what Agatha wants, I don't know how we can even dispute it.
I change lives, baby.
And I end them. Sweetheart, no bargains hold. Only fools know restraint.
Only losers lose!
I've been under the knife so many times, I'm practically immune to it.
If your scissors are dull, may I recommend sharpening them with leather?
I think I hit you.
Mimal says I must have a guardian angel. To enter the ring but abstain from playing is suicidal. Your virtue makes you nothing but a liability.
You're gonna die. You're gonna die. You're gonna die.